Our brothers and sisters and comrades, this is Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and leader of the International Uhuru Movement and the African Revolution. I want to welcome everybody for coming on. The first thing I want to do, however, is to challenge the notion that's been promoted and that people have been trained to accept as true about the attention span for people who come to social media. At one juncture, I used to read it was 10 seconds, and now with the advent of TikTok, it may even be less than that. I think that's certainly how people are being trained to look at information, to receive information, to make sure that we don't get an opportunity or we unlearn how to pay attention to our environment and to understand the world. I think that this is something that's purposefully being done. And I'm saying that if you have a 10-second attention span, you're in the wrong spot. And that you should go ahead and find a Democratic Party video or something like that to watch. But if, in fact, you need, and I believe it's true of most people, and certainly I believe it's true of most young African people who were the first to break from the Democratic Party and the Kamala Harris trick, who were the first to desert her. And I see growing evidence of that continuation, though most people seem to be unclear where to go, having broken from the Democratic Party trajectory. I want you to be here with us. Let's look at this. Let's talk about this. This is a very critical time in the history, not just of Black people and not just of what's called America, but the world is engaged in an incredibly significant moment. And you have an opportunity to play an incredibly significant role in shaping what the future is going to look like. You have a responsibility to do that, just as I do, which is the reason we've entered this discussion. But before even getting into the discussion, I want to make a couple of announcements of things that you should be aware of. And I'm calling you to look at this. And one thing is that on Saturday, April 5th, just a couple of days from now, there is going to be an event, a Hands-Off Uhuru, a Hands-Off Africa event. And the basis of that is not over, that we are still engaged in an incredibly significant struggle that, as many of you know, on July 29, 2022, the United States government made an assault on the African liberation movement overall with the attack on the Uhuru movement, the African People's Socialist Party, in two cities in this country, St. Louis, Missouri, and Washington, D.C. It's testimony to just the state of affairs in this country and in the world. That country that boasts of being the strongest, biggest, best armed country in the world would end up spending millions and millions of dollars and attacking one of the poorest sections in St. Louis, Missouri. I'll tell you, it's called Red Bud Avenue, and which is where I live right now, and using armored vehicles and using flashbang grenades and using military forces with FBI tags on their outfits, armed with assault weapons to occupy my home, the home that I share with my wife, for hours, to handcuff my wife and to zip tie me and offer us an opportunity to sit on the curb at pre-dawn. They do the same thing at the office that we have in the southern part of St. Louis, which is where the majority of the white people live. And this office is occupied by a solidarity movement that has taken the struggle of African people for reparations, and that exposes the genocide being committed against African people here and around the world on a regular basis, with meetings that happen there on a regular basis, and also with banners over their doors that this was also attacked. They use battering rams, they use armored vehicles, they knock down doors, they They use what they call flashbang grenades or stun grenades and what have you to frighten the people, terrorize the people who are in the place, and to terrorize people in the neighborhood to convince them that they should not be associated with us. This is the United States government that has been making war, supporting war, facilitating war of extermination in Palestine, killing thousands and thousands of Palestinian people in this small area that they call Gaza. And this is not a moment where I'm going to just talk about the significance of Palestine in the sense that many people have recognized for the longest period of time that Palestine has been the key to the Arab Revolution. It has been the key to changing everything that's in this area that they call the Middle East, which was been defined, maps drawn, and things like that, and named by Europe, colonizers. The same military forces that have been orchestrating what we're going to be talking about shortly, the war against Russia, using Ukraine as a vehicle and as cannon fodder to make that happen. They would be attacking us. They would be attacking the African Revolution to us. This is testimony not only to how significant Palestine is to the Arab Revolution, but the significance of Africa and African people to the revolution in general. We'll say some things about that moving forward. I want to say that this meeting is going to be happening Saturday, April 5th, and people can register to attend this conference at handsoffuhuru.org, handsoffuhuru.org/register. On April 12th and 13th, which is a Saturday and Sunday also, the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations will be hosting, I think, what is the 9th electoral campaign school that we have done, and which I think is one of the critical bases for the United States government attack on us as well, because we've robbed them of this sanctuary place where only the African petty bourgeoisie who are at the service of white liberals have been able to occupy the space and to pretend and to give the impression to the world and to us sometimes that they represent what it is that we want, what we think of what African people want. And we're saying we've organized this this movement and this school to train people to demystify the whole concept of elections and the electoral process, and to make it impossible for the African petty bourgeoisie, I'm talking about middle class and milksops and lick spittles, who usually work more for the liberal sector of the white ruling class, to rob them of this monopoly on the electoral process, that they kill Malcolm to keep us out of, that they kill King to keep us out of, that they attacked and destroyed the Black Panther Party as a means of preventing the questions and issues that are critical to our struggle against colonialism from being something that the masses of people in this country, Africans certainly, but there are other people in this country as well who have the ability to unite with the struggle against colonialism, given an opportunity. And the electoral process is that process that has been made legitimate, and where doors are supposed to be open, giving people an opportunity to share ideas and struggle around questions. But if they kill Malcolm, if they kill Panthers, if they kill King and forces who would be representative of the ideas that that needs to be part of a program for the liberation of African people, then of course that's never something that will happen. And the only thing you're left with is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Kennedys and the Clintons and other things like that in the Democratic Party. And because we attacked that, creating this electoral school, and this is the thing that we're asking you to participate in on the 12th and 13th of this month. Come and participate in this, where we're training people to be able to engage in the electoral process and don't have to worry now that this process we're engaged in somehow makes you a lackey, makes you somebody who's in the service of anti-revolution project. So that's going to be April 12th and 13th. And it's going to include some incredibly significant forces that of our own. Professor Ikemba Ojori, who will be one of the presenters, and Dr. Masamela Odom, who heads the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and who has been involved in the struggle for liberation, as has Ojori. On the right side of the question, there's Chimarenga Sambayo, who is out of Florida. And he himself has run for office at different times on an anti-colonial platform and been ganged up on by all of the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, and what have you, because of that. But he's become a go-to person in terms of how to deal with these questions. And so he's going to be one of the presenters. And Akilia Nai, who at one juncture was threatened with indictment by the federal government because of her relationship to the African People's Socialist Party, and whose house, who was handcuffed at 6 o'clock in the morning there in St. Petersburg, Florida, and threatened with the same kind of thing that they threatened me and Penny Hess and Jesse Neville, who were members of the African People's Solidarity Committee with. And then there's Comrade Charles Barron, who has been elected on several times, maybe spent something, maybe 40 years or so as an elected official out of New York City on the city council. He's been an extraordinary force and has taken to the electoral process the kind of issues and things like that most of the squirming liberal Negroes who we have to work with, who they put forth to replace us, who they support to make sure that our voices don't get on the agenda. Barron is somebody who is quite experienced. He also has been a member of the New York State Assembly, so he will be one of the presenters. And then there's Afia Mangaza, who was with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the 1960s. And she was a part of the Atlanta Project, where they put forth the document in the process of supporting Julian Bond, who was a SNCC member who had won an election in Georgia, and who they denied the ability to occupy his seat because he was opposed to the U.S. government's war on Vietnam. If it sounds familiar to what's happened to us, it's because it's the same situation that we are confronted with now that we were confronted with then. And so Afia Mangaza, she will be one of the people who will be presenting. So I wanted to say that you can go to blackisbackcoalition.org for more information and to register for that. So what I want to talk to you about now is something that is really important at this time, because many people have been frightened to no end. And many people have been disoriented by the election and actions of Donald John Trump as a consequence of becoming U.S. president, and the kinds of things that Trump is accused of having done. First of all, is something that I just want to call attention to, because much of what he's accused of having done is stuff that the Democratic Party has done all along, and it does even now. The Democratic Party is the first entity in recent history to use the Russian gambit, to use the Russian claim, to use the Russian trope. The Democratic Party was the one that was responsible for election denial. They've claimed that of Donald Trump, but it was the Democratic Party when Hillary Clinton lost that election, to the surprise of the Democratic Party and most of the liberal establishment. When Hillary Clinton lost that election, she claimed not to have lost the election. She claimed that it was the Russians. It was the Russians who are responsible for Trump's success in the electoral process. And if you remember, they charged Trump over and over again with election denial. that he was claiming that it was rigged against him and what have you. And Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party were the ones who raised that. And Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party is responsible in the final analysis for the charge made against me that somehow I was working for Russia because I was advancing the cause of the liberation of African people in particular and the colonized peoples of the world in general, and especially of Africa. It was Clinton who did that. And so I think it's important to say that. And this is not an apology for Trump. What I'm saying is that you're looking at colonialism. And colonialism is the foreign and alien domination of a people for the purpose of economic exploitation, for political purposes, to the advantage of the colonizers themselves. And so we hear people now more and more talking about colonialism. They weren't talking about colonialism just a few short weeks ago. It's we in the African People's Socialist Party. I am the one who raised the colonial question. I've been writing about this since the 70s, but doing more than writing about it. We've been engaged in struggle. But somebody has said it before, and I'll say it again, that philosophers have explained the world. But the task is to change the world. And so we've been engaged in anti-colonial struggle, not just some anti-colonial discussion that you can hear increasingly today. Not only by people who now claim to be leftists or claim to be a part of the struggle of African people, but even sectors of the ruling class or representatives of their mouthpieces, some who are obviously reactionary and Zionists, some who are obviously reactionary and now even attempt to justify German colonialism, which happened a long time ago. Why the hell are they talking about German colonialism today? It's because of the colonial struggle, the anti-colonial struggle that we are making today. It's the anti-colonial struggle that African People's Socialist Party has pushed back on the agenda so that it's impossible to ignore the colonial question anymore. So even when the Palestinians struck out this time, the Palestinian movement that's always been supported by the African liberation movement, now people are talking about colonialism. And so the colonialism becomes one of the ideological targets of the rulers of this country from the right and sometimes from the left. And the left sometimes not consciously so. The left talking about, I've seen several books recently by the left on settler colonialism. Now they got to talk about settler colonialism all of a sudden because they are moving also to take charge of the discussion. They take it into academia, they take it into places that will try to define it and take it away from revolutionaries who are trying to change the world as opposed to simply explaining the world. It's our struggle against colonialism and the theory that we have developed around that that's responsible for Oxford University inviting us in 2019 to come to Oxford to talk to them about the African internationalism, which is the party's theory. This is the philosophy that guides everything that we do. It's now back on the agenda, and it's something that they won't be able to control. So here we are with a situation that has caused so much consternation with the advent of Donald Trump. And even as they're talking about, people are having to talk about colonialism more and more, we hear more and more from our leftist friends, this ongoing betrayal of the struggle against colonialism, because our leftists have rediscovered fascism. And they're saying that the fascism is the fundamental question that we have to deal with. And they're saying that it's fascism. They never would unite with us in the struggle against colonialism. Even the communist forces in France refused to fight against colonialism. They couldn't even unite with the struggle of African people in Algeria that was held by France, who was struggling against colonialism. It took them ages to unite with the Vietnamese who were fighting against French colonialism. They wanted to claim that both France, Algeria and Vietnam were departments of France, that there was no basis and legitimate basis for struggling against colonialism. And then we had a situation in Portugal, so-called Portugal, Africa, where Portuguese leftists who were themselves living under fascism. And they made the statement to revolutionaries there, including Comrade Amilcar Cabral, who many of you are familiar with because he was a brilliant theoretician, and he led the struggle on the ground until he was assassinated for the liberation of our people. And Cabral, in responding to the Portuguese left, who told us in Africa that if the struggle has to be against fascism, because if we fight against fascism in Portugal, if we fight against Portuguese fascism, colonialism will go away. And Cabral said, I don't know about that. We hate fascism. We don't like fascism or anything, but we know for sure that if we defeat Portuguese colonialism, Portuguese fascism will fall in Portugal. And sure enough, 7 months after the victory of our forces in what they characterize as Portuguese Africa, Portuguese fascism collapsed. A point is that the colonial question is a critical question. And even as people would have us fighting against Trump, it's the part of the left's betrayal, that unwillingness to say that the fundamental question we are dealing with, and that is what's happening to African people, what's happening to Mexican people, what's happening to indigenous people living in concentration camps in this country that never even get mentioned. This is the betrayal of the colonial left, the settler colonial left in this instance. And so while people want to talk about Trump, it's in a way and fascism, it's a way to evade the responsibility to talk about the colonial domination of African people, the colonial domination of Mexican people, who up until 1948, well, you saw in 1948, the United States government stole half of Mexico. It's an evasion of the responsibility to deal with the question that of the indigenous population in these concentration camps called Indian reservations. If you deal with those questions, we wouldn't have to worry about fascism here. The fact of the matter is that fascism is a form of the state, just like so-called democracy is a form of the state. Democracy for whom has always been the question. The democracy that was founded in this country, I'm talking now about the United States, is a democracy that came at the expense of the rights and liberties and resources and lives of the indigenous population here, of African people who were brought here in chains and ships, and those of us who survived the trip. This gives this lie that somehow that America is some kind of nation of immigrants, and Africans are not immigrants. We were captives. And it was white people who were living, fleeing from the despair and poverty and despotism of Europe, who, if anything, we can't even allow them to be characterized as immigrants. They were invaders, and they invaded this space, and they killed and took the land in the most grotesque ways of the indigenous people. And the system that we have now is an experience now when white people are concerned about the fascism, etc., what they are concerned about is that the system that was born of killing indigenous people and taking their land, the system that was born of creating wealth from the stolen labor of African people, and its manifestation, how it represents itself in the world, this whole parasitic social system has now begun to intrude into their lives in some way or another, or appear to intrude in their lives. And why shouldn't it? If it's killing Africans, if it's killing Mexicans, if it's killing the indigenous population, who in the hell are white people that you should think that it should not intrude into your lives? But rather than unite with the struggle in a deep and profound way to change this world by uniting with the Palestinians, the Africans, with the indigenous people here, you do require the indigenous people to fight your battles for you with another sector of the ruling class by saying what we're fighting against is fascism, that somehow Donald Trump has become the face of oppression in America, when the fact of the matter is it was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that attacked my house at 5 o'clock in the morning on December 29th in 2022. It was Kamala Harris and Joe Biden who are the most recent aggressors that's murdered thousands and thousands of Palestinians. So many people that people don't even talk about it anymore. It's become an ubiquitous reality. It's just there. Just like air is there. You don't talk about air because you have it. And that's the same thing that's happening with the Palestinian murder. that's happening in plain sight. So I'm saying all of this, and I think it's important to say that we've said all along what was happening with this Ukrainian war, that a world order that had come about, that had been defined in the 1940s, subsequent to the Second World Imperialist War, that was called World War II. After the Russians had crushed the Nazis in Berlin, that the United States claimed responsibility for having done. Russia lost something, maybe 27, 29 million people in that war because the United States and the other colonizer countries had intended to allow the Russians and the Germans to kill each other off. And then the U.S. would, and the other colonial powers would ascend to the helm of the colonial project. Are you still with me? I want you to stay with me. And I want you to share this because people need to be involved in this discussion. This is not your 10-second hit or anything like that. You should share this. This is discussion that you won't hear about in your civics classes, or certainly you won't get it through the New York Times that we're going to talk about now. And the United States government, here's some statements about from the indictment of who we've characterized as the Uhuru Three. The United States government made this attack on me, on the Uhuru movement, and on Africa. Because believe me, that's what it is. It's an attack on Africa. Because for the first time in 100 years or so, almost 100 years, Africa was speaking with one voice, or in the process of speaking with one voice. They'd killed Garvey. They got rid of Garvey, rather. May have killed him, but certainly they punished him. They framed him up because he had initiated economic development programs that would negate the hold of colonialism on Africa and African people in general. Now, Garvey never set foot on the continent of Africa. Many people may not know that, but he led this movement and to create Africa, turn Africa into an economic powerhouse and a political powerhouse. That's what it was about. And so he had begun this project in the United States, and he had created for the first time, and perhaps the only time in our history, a shipping line for African people. It wasn't a Garvey shipping line. It wasn't a New York shipping line. It was a shipping line for African people. It's called the Black Star shipping line. That was to facilitate trade and what have you among African people globally. And the United States government, as opposed to helping this effort, you would think they will help this effort, looking at the condition they have created for African people globally, and especially coming to the end of the First World War, by the way, which, like the Second World War, was a war to redivide the world. You've got these bandits, colonizers who control the entire world. Think about this. They control the entire world. And these bandit colonizers, a minority population on the planet, controlling the entire world, controlling Africa, controlling much of Asia, controlling all of the Americas, etc. They control the entire world. And so this every, like mafioso forces, every now and then they have to fight a war to redivide the world because they don't like the deal that they got in the last one. So the first world war, the first colonial war to redivide the world happened, and at the time that Garvey was really leading a powerful movement, and at that time there was something like 11 million members and so associates with the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League that was led by Marcus Garvey. That was a powerful movement. Think about that. And you're talking about a movement that not only existed in Africa, which is incredible, in America and the Americas, which is incredible, but also Australia, also parts of India. All of these people were Black people uniting to capture our freedom and our dignity and our resources. And so Garvey was attacked. And this, you got to remember, these are African people. All of us around the world have lived under white colonial domination. All of us have lived under white colonial domination, and Garvey leads this movement. And now we've got a shipping line. That's really a critical thing, because it's going to give us ability to trade with each other and then to collect our economic capacity and grow industry. He had created all kinds of other things. And I mean, if you got a black dog, blame it on Garvey. If you see black pictures of Jesus and what have you, blame it on Garvey. Garvey created all kinds of institutions, etc. And so they framed him up and said that he used the mail to defraud the United States government. They said that to defraud black people, just like they said that I defrauded the United States government because somehow the economic development work we were doing, somehow the work that we were doing to spread the struggle of African people throughout the world, somehow the work that we were doing to connect Africans was at the behest and leadership and direction of Russia. What's extraordinary? And the only reason they could get away with telling, or think they could get away with telling that lie, is because they have denied African people and the peoples of the world information about the struggle of black people and convinced the white people of their own superiority, this whole anti-racism garbage, etc., and convinced a lot of black people of the superiority of white people. And so they could tell this lie. They could liquidate the history of our people and our struggle. They could liquidate the fact that Africans, we were building pyramids in Africa before Europeans mastered fire. I mean, so this whole notion that we have no agency of our own, that it takes somebody white to tell us what to do, that we are oppressed, that we need to be free. And the Russians didn't have any of the experience that we have in terms of being enslaved. How the hell the Russians going to tell us to get free? We would teach the Russians of anything about how to get free, etc. So anyway, they framed us up, and we've been involved in this struggle for a long time. They use the parasitic trope that's been there forever, the parasite who lives off everybody else, and then flips the script and give and give the impression that the host is living off the parasite, that the host needs the parasite. If you don't have me sucking your blood, what are you going to do, buddy? Right? That was the kind of thing that's been created. So a point is that the New York Times now writes this article, and the indictment that the United States government had put against us. So here's page 8 of the indictment. From page 8, they're talking about how the Russians are responsible for controlling us, and because the Russians, they said, through these influence operations, Russia attempted to shape foreign perceptions and to influence populations by, among other things, seeking to create wedges that reduce trust and confidence in democratic processes, degrade democratization efforts, weaken U.S. partnerships with European allies, undermine Western sanctions, encourage anti-U.S. and anti-Western political views, and counter efforts to bring Ukraine and other former Soviet states into European and international institutions. This is what the United States, this is what the indictment against us said. This is what we are working with the Russians, under leadership of the Russians, who are trying to make all of this stuff happen that I just mentioned. And they said that was overt. That was one of the overt acts. And then on page 28, overt act number 68, it says that on or about February 27, 2022, the unindicted co-conspirator, that's me, 4, gave a video presentation on behalf of the African People's Socialist Party, in which unindicted co-conspirator 4 stated that the APSP and defendant Yeshitela, along with the leaders of Venezuela, China, Iran, Cuba, Nicaragua, has spoken in opposition to the United States imperialist-created crisis in Ukraine and in solidarity with the people of Russia and their elected government and leadership. And so, you know, this is the New York Times article. It's making several other statements. This is from the New York Times article, I think March 29th, I think it was. Yeah, March 29th, 2025. You should look it up yourself and look at what the article says. And it says that the New York Times investigation reveals that America was woven into the war far more intimately and broadly than previously understood. See, they didn't understand this stuff. At critical moments, the partnership was the backbone of Ukrainian military operations that, by U.S. count, have killed or wounded more than 700,000 Russian soldiers. It says that side by side in Wiesbaden, this is Germany, Mission Command Center, which is one controlled by the United States, American and Ukrainian officers planned Kyiv's counteroffensives. A vast American intelligence collection effort, both guided, big picture battle strategy and funnel precise targeting information down to Ukrainian soldiers in the field. It goes further than that. You know, one European intelligence chief recalled being taken aback to learn how deeply enmeshed his NATO counterparts had become in Ukrainian operations. They are a part of the kill chain now, he said. So again and again, the group set up another location. They're talking about how the Russians were moved from this place to that place, and again, the Americans found it, and the Ukrainians destroyed it. So anyway, this is the kind of stuff. It said time and again, the Biden administration authorized clandestine operations it had previously prohibited. American military advisors were dispatched to Kyiv and later allowed to travel closer to the fighting. These are American military advisors, right? Military and CIA officers in Wiesbaden helped plan and support a campaign of Ukrainian strikes in Russia-annexed Crimea. Finally, the military and then the CIA received the green light to enable pinpoint strikes deep inside Russia itself. And then there's later on where they mention how a small team of CIA officers were allowed to stay in Kyiv. And because right before the so-called Russia invaded, the U.S. moved its military forces out of the embassy. That's what this article says. They knew. They moved the forces out of the embassy, but left the CIA in place there. A Polish general, so they had a Polish general who was playing a role, a British general was managing logistic hub, a Canadian would oversee the training of the Ukrainians. This was a colonial war that was initiated against Russia. And so this is the kind of stuff that we were talking about without naming the specifics. This is what we said. We didn't have these details. We didn't know the names of the people who were involved and what have you. Some of the names are in here. But the thing is, you're looking at this article from the New York Times. It's talking about how the United States is really helping to defend Ukraine. And that's why it's doing all of this stuff. It's taking over the military. It's using things like what is this? The National Global, Geospatial Intelligence Apparatus. They say that. And we know about the NGA because we're fighting it right here in St. Louis, Missouri, which is another one of the reasons they had to attack us, because they were taking Black people's property here in St. Louis, pushing people out of their homes. And occupied 2,000 acres of land through eminent domain to put this entity that's there. It controls all the satellites, all of the drones that's attacking in war in Palestine and Ukraine, all these other places are controlled by this NGA. There's NGA East, that's in the Washington, D.C. area, with more than 2 million square feet of territory. That's the third largest installation in the D.C. area. And then there's NGA West here. That's taking the 2,000 acres of Black people's land here. And so that's another one of the reasons. This is all connected. It's really important for us to understand this. This is not about your neighborhood leftists who want you to go out and protest the last thing that you think that Trump did to upset you. This is the thing that's given direction to how the world, how everything is unfolding in the world in terms of the whole economic and political configuration of the planet right now. That's what we are dealing with. And that's why that's part of what I want to talk about also. So the New York Times wrote this article. But even this article by the New York Times is a bit of disinformation. Because what the article does not mention is the United States government had helped to overthrow the Ukrainian government in 2014. This government that is now helping, this army that is out there helping the CIA, helping the poor, feckless Ukrainians and Ukrainian army and what have you, they overthrew the damn government in 2014. They're the ones who are responsible for Zelensky being in power in the first place. I think it's important. This war did not start. This not start in February of 2022. Is it February that they claim they started in 2022 by Russia? This is why. This is one of the reasons why we say it's a defensive war by Russia, because the war had already begun. Obviously, it had begun when they overthrew the head of state in Ukraine, chased him out of the country and what have you, because he was too close to Russia, because they wanted the Ukrainians to go jump into the European Union and have more solidarity and with the European Union, and they decided that they were going to have unity with Russia as well. This is the thing that made them overthrow this government. So it started much earlier than 2022 that the United States government, and this article in the New York Times would have us believe. That's one thing that's important. Other people have recognized this, even at our trial. We had incredible lawyers, one of whom actually when the court suggested that they would not allow our expert, our Russian expert, to testify about this Ukrainian Russia connection, how the Ukrainians how the U.S. had facilitated the coup. Because they quoted me. They quoted me in a press conference, and they used this as a part of the indictment against me because I said this. And so, we had brilliant lawyers who fought it in the courts, and that's the reason that I'm able to have this discussion with you right now, up to now. You are the people and the things that the lawyers were willing to take into the courtroom. So that's one thing that people recognize. But what most people don't understand is that what gave shape and form to the political and economic configuration of the world that we are talking about today is that years ago, this is during the era of Garvey. Well, the U.S. has been attacking Russia for more than 100 years. And partially because Russia had joined with the trajectory of the anti-colonial movement around the world. Garvey didn't call Garvey by name, might not have even known his name, although I suspect Lenin probably did know, because Garvey had the largest organization. A lot of Africans recognize that Garvey had the biggest Black organization. Garvey had probably the largest anti-imperialist organization in the world. Even FBI agents, looking at the documents that have been retrieved around Garvey, and their investigation said how leaders from around the world, they would come and they would report to Garvey. Ho Chi Minh attended meetings by Garvey, and as did other forces. And Garvey was the contemporary of people like Francisco Pancho Villa. He was contemporary of people who were leading revolutionary movements in Nicaragua. In fact, the Negro World, which was Garvey's newspaper, functioned as the newspaper for a sector of the Vietnamese resistance. So this is, the period that we're talking about, Russia refusing to participate in the First Imperialist World War to redivide the world. Russia refusing, and because of Russia's refusal, and the United States had expected Russia to play a role. This is where they expected Russia to play a role, because this is the same period of time the Balfour Declaration was put forth, where England gave European Jews, gave Palestine to them. And they did this before the Russian Revolution. The Tsar was in power, but they still had hopes that the Russians would support them when Russia was pulling out of the war. This was a real problem. They had hopes that Russia would support them because of Jews who were in the leadership of the Soviet Union, of the Communist Party of Russia, like Trotsky, among others. And it was Trotsky who exposed what they were doing with the Balfour Declaration. It was Trotsky who exposed the deal that they had made to divide up what's now called the Middle East. And that's where the Lebanon that people talks about today, that's where it's got its configuration. The Palestine people talk about today, there's borders and configuration, where this is where it was created. Trotsky busted it up. He exposed it on the world stage and what have you. So they didn't get the support they thought they were going to get from Russia. But the Russians played an incredibly significant role. And because the Russians led this revolution that was not expected in Russia, the United States was part of several colonizer countries that invaded Russia. And they also included Japan, as well as other colonial powers. They actually literally invaded Russia. Russia had to fight for its life. And then after that, what they did was they did an economic quarantine in Russia to starve Russia to death, to make sure the Russians did not have access to the kinds of resources needed for it to produce. But what the Russians did, they destroyed the whole feudal regime. They destroyed the rights and properties that the feudal overlords and landlords had. And then because they did that, they were able to change the lives of the people. They broke down the regulations that prohibited ordinary working people from being able to be officers in the military, to be able to go to school and get a certain kind of education and whatever. So you had a temporarily rapid development inside Russia, despite the fact this economic quarantine kept Russia outside of the overall global economy. And then, so that was the basis of the attack. This group came to be known later on. Russia, after this attack on Russia, the U.S. and the Western powers kept Russia isolated until the Second World Imperialist War. And the Second War, at a certain juncture, they came in and allowed Russia in the house. And under Stalin, and this was a place where they allowed Stalin to come in. The Russians actually crushed the Nazis, and subsequent to that, with the peace deal, they came up with what came to be known as the Atlanticist Bloc. And this is the founding of the United Nations, the founding of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the founding of the World Bank, the founding of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. That's all of these things controlled by the United States, by the way. This all pulled together as a part of the Atlanticist Bloc. And then when Trump got elected, before he got elected, And this is what makes this thing so tenuous about Black people and the Democratic Party, or either of these parties for that matter. Before he got elected, the Democrats had been perceived as the party of peace and the party of the working class and what have you. And Trump came out of the boat attacking the Atlanticist bloc. He didn't say this is what I'm attacking. He said I'm attacking NATO, attacking the United Nations, I'm attacking the whole trade relations structures that's set up because America is being chunked, being played, that was his logic and what have you. And so he came out saying he was against all of these nation building wars, etc. He came out as the anti-war president. And then you look at the convention of the Democratic Party, they had generals, they came out warmongering, and they're the ones who are fighting for war. And so now you've got this situation that people ignore the fact that elections in this country and most of the world that's been influenced by this country are simply nonviolent contests for control of the state by different sectors of the bourgeoisie. This is the thing that keeps the system stable. They got this nonviolent contest where you got this economic interest and I got this economic interest, and we can fight over it without having to go to blows. We don't have to have the war in order to do it. And the same thing is true without the whole world, because they created the United Nations. So we have a parliamentary process where we can dominate the world without having to go to war. We can control it. We can rig it so that Security Council, which is only the bourgeois, the colonial powers, can veto anything that the masses of people in the General Assembly try to do. This was the setup that they had. And this was something that Trump proved a disaster for. It's not because Trump is necessarily a nice guy or anything like that. He's sympathetic with the interests of all the peoples around the world. He wanted to get a piece of the Russia and the resources in Russia, and he connected with other people who had this. These were hungry capitalists on the make who wanted to get a piece of the action. Look at when Trump was elected, his campaign manager was arrested and I think imprisoned on the same charge that they charged us with. And others who were close to Trump, they were all imprisoned. Many of them folded and punked out and quit and surrendered and pled guilty on these ridiculous charges and what have you. But it was all connected to Russia. And this is one of the reasons that the Clinton was opposed to it, because only it gave greater influence to Russia. It has disrupted the whole Atlantic Charter, busted that up. That's what they keep talking about for the last 75 years or 80 years. This is the way we used to do stuff. Yeah, you used to do stuff like that, but it's all gone. It's not happening anymore. So it's not to say that it's been done for us. It hasn't been. What it is to say is that we have to chart our own course, and we have to have a capacity to carry out our own course. And this is why the Uhuru movement is under attack. And this is what I'm talking to you about and want to talk to you about. I want you also to donate to the uhurus.com/donate now. But also there are things that we do. We say that we can chart our own course, that we don't have to rely on the Democrats or the Republicans, that we can rely on ourselves. This is why we want you to come and participate in the Black is Back Coalition electoral school that's going to be happening soon with the 12th and 13th of this month. This is why we want you to participate in these discussions, because it's more than discussions. How do we change the world so that it benefits, it facilitates the interests of Africans and the oppressed peoples of the world, as opposed to being on this thing with Trump and Kamala Harris and Biden and the Democratic Party. And we know that this is what you want too. This is why Harris lost the election. People were tired of the same old setup. This is why even Walmart socialist Bernie Sanders, I call him a Walmart socialist because his socialism is so fake. You know, his socialism was one that also had no unity with the reparations demand, which means it had no unity with the struggle against colonialism. His socialism was one that you can get $12 an hour after a number of years and what have you. Hell, well, Walmart's doing that already. And so it's a Walmart socialism, Bernie Sanders, et cetera. But they do not unite. with the struggle of colonized people that's going to change the world. This is what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to take a stance, asking you to join with us in making this stand. Join with the African People's Socialist Party. Join with the Uhuru movement. Join with the Black is Black Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. And again, we're calling on you to donate to Uhuru Tours, uhurutours.com/